More than 100 people across multiple states are dead, and communities are left to endure the aftermath. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster says recovery will require patience.
We want people to remain calm. Help is on the way. It's just going to take some time.
Around 17,000 residents in Conyers, Georgia, southeast of Atlanta, have been urged to evacuate, and more have been required to shelter in place as a precaution due to a biolab chemical fire that broke out Sunday morning in the Atlanta suburb. Joy Dukes of Fox TV affiliate WAGA in Atlanta reports.
The smoke is still very much visible here, and we are told that it could be some days before this goes away. The EPD and EPA were both on scene here trying to kind of assess this situation. One thing that is unclear to us at this point is exactly what these chemicals that are filling the air are made of. We just aren't clear on that, and they have not shared that information.
The man charged with attempting to assassinate Donald Trump after positioning himself with a rifle outside one of the former president's Florida golf courses is due to appear in court today to enter a plea to 5 federal charges. 58-year-old Ryan Ralph is expected to plead not guilty to charges that include attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett has an idea of what the defense might do.
I actually expect the defense to ask for a psychiatric evaluation. But as unhinged and strange as Ruth may be, his actions indicate he did know right from wrong, which is the legal standard for sanity under federal law. I think the defense is going to attack specific intent, which is a necessary element of the main crime here. We know that because the defense attorney's on record as saying that her client intended to fail, and that letter you referred to, Steve, written several months ago, allegedly proves it. She says, oh, this was just a publicity stunt. I mean, that may be far-fetched, if not ludicrous, but the defense, I think, will argue that Ruth lacked specific criminal intent to kill Trump.
Schools, businesses, and even churches that are teaching or even nodding toward critical race theory are playing with a more destructive ideology than they may realize.
In 2019, the Southern Baptist Convention voted down a resolution that would have considered critical race theory a useful tool in discussions about race. In 2021, it rejected any worldview that divides people up by race, but didn't specifically mention CRT. Perhaps if they'd heard what Brian Leszczynski, a Tim Walz appointment to the Minnesota Department of Education, had to say, they might have rejected it more explicitly.
We can't be like, oh, no, critical race theory is just about telling our stories and divert. It's not about that. It's about overthrow.
Specifically, the overthrow of the U.S. government and democracy in general.
If the nation state as constructed is irreversibly racist, then it must be done with. It must be overthrown. You can't be a critical race theorist and be pro-U.S.
Terrace Todd of Project 21 says CRT is called a theory, but in many schools, businesses, government agencies, and even some churches, it's gone beyond the theory stage.
So they've literally taken a theory and now they made it practice. They made it their belief system and wrapped their whole agenda up into that to now act upon it.
Todd says not only is CRT anti-American, it's anti-Christian as well.
That's also saying that God is unable to fix it. That the power of God, that him and his great wisdom is unable to fix the system as we know it.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening to AFR on this Monday, September the 30th, 2024. Joining me in studio is Ed Vitagliano. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Tim.
And Chris Woodward. Good morning, Chris. Well, the hurricane that hit the Florida shores and then went on up into the southeastern part of the country, namely Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, was just it's one of the top stories of the year because the devastation that has been that has taken place. If you didn't experience it, sometimes it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. But for the folks who did experience in those regions, much of those many parts of those states I just mentioned, it's life altering for a lot of people. And so we wanted to talk about that with 8 Days of Hope President Steve Tiber. 8 Days of Hope obviously is doing a lot of work in that part of the country, as they do always when we have natural disasters. Steve, good morning.
Hey, guys. Good morning. How are y'all doing?
Good, Steve. 8 Days of Hope, obviously, you guys are going to be deploying, immediately? Or are you there?
You know, this is our third day of feeding people in Perry, Florida. We actually, as soon as the storm passed through, we started headed down that way with thousands and thousands of meals with our mass feeding arms. So, again, working with the local church, I think already 4,000 families have been fed. Some have met Jesus for the first time waiting in the line for food, and our volunteers have been working nonstop. So we're going to continue to serve those in need without power in the Perry, Florida area. But yesterday we announced we are deploying our rapid response team to Valdosta, Georgia. And our volunteers, our leaders are there right now. We have millions of dollars of equipment there. And the volunteers will start showing up later tonight and tomorrow. We'll be there for at least 2.5 weeks, probably longer. And while we're serving there, we are right now looking at Asheville, North Carolina. So by the end of the week, it could be 3 different states. And to your point, Tim, the depthness of the storm has been really challenging for ministries like 8 Days of Hope.
Well, yeah, I mean, the swath of the storm was unlike anything I can quite remember in terms of its impact. Hurricanes, are devastating, especially a Category 4 like this one, but usually it's been more or less within a 50-mile radius of the beach, and then inland it gets flooding and rain about a 100-mile radius maybe, but we're talking about hundreds of miles impacted by this.
Yeah.
Asheville, North Carolina, is like underwater right now, isn't it?
It really is. We have 271 volunteer leaders, and about 8 of them live in North Carolina. And again, we're working fervently. As soon as we can get a team in there safely to develop a plan to serve those in need. But you're right. This storm is unlike any other storm we've worked on over the last 19 years. I mean, we've done some big ones, Katrina and Harvey, but we've never seen a storm go so far inland. And the flooding, Tim, in some of these states, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama even, it's been eye-opening.
I saw where the report, guys, was that, and Chris, you can comment on this if you want to. And then Steve, I wanted you to give your information. People can contact you if they want to make a donation or they want to go and physically help with you guys. But I saw a report where it said the Atlanta metro area received 11 inches of rain in a 48-hour period. Okay. Georgia, I'm guessing is much like Alabama and Mississippi because, we get the Gulf moisture during the year and you get a lot of rain. You get 50, 58, 60 inches of rain annually on average. And you're talking about 1/5 of that in less than 2 days. So the deluge, you just can't imagine unless you experience it what that is. Go ahead.
Yeah. Governments, cities are not built for that amount of rainfall in that quick of time. If you've ever been out west where they have flash flooding, it's because it is so dry out there. If you get a huge downpour, that's why all of a sudden it starts to build up because it's not used to getting something of that sort. That's why, like I lived in Birmingham, and there are parts of Birmingham that if you get just a huge downpour, they're just 5 points south where that shooting was recently. Areas like that just that are not used to it and not built to take that amount of water that quickly, they tend to flood. And then all of a sudden you have major problems.
Steve, one of the things, of course, everyone's been transfixed on this storm and its aftermath. I know around our house we've been watching and, of course, praying, for the desperation of these people. But there are entire communities, a couple of communities completely wiped out off the map, so to speak. And there are entire communities that are cut off from the outside world because the lone bridge that goes into their community is gone, swept away. So, I mean, this makes things very difficult even for groups like 8 Days of Hope to get in.
Well, great point. Many roads have washed away, especially when you get to rural parts of North Carolina. You know, we always want to be there the day after the storm passes with generators and laundry trailers, feeding trailers, and bobcats. Of course, we got to make sure our volunteers are safe as well. I'm thankful that we were able to get to Florida the next morning. I know that today and tomorrow we're preparing 6,000 meals to take up, we think, to North Carolina here in the next 48 hours. There's no quick fix here. You know, think about the flooding that happens to somebody's home and just the devastation that family goes through. But it just doesn't stop at their home. It's their church. It's the playgrounds that they grew up on. It's their school. It's their business. I mean, so lives are turned upside down. But this is where God is calling his people to be a glimpse of hope, because our God is not a hopeless God. And so yesterday, a truck driver that came by, loved the T-shirt, wanted a T-shirt. One of our volunteers led him to the Lord. He was so curious about why we do what we do. And I'm just thankful that we're able to serve these families in need. And without American Family Radio and our support, guys, you know this stat, 85% of the 60,000 volunteers that travel with us listen to American Family Radio. So even though today you might be in Mississippi and I'm in another state, know that you're making a big difference by getting the word out.
Yeah. All right, Steve, if people listening, they want to make a donation or they want to sign up, you know, for information, as you say, many of our listeners are very familiar, most all of our listeners are very familiar with 8 Days of Hope, but they maybe folks listening want to know, how can I help? What can I do? What would you say to those folks?
Yeah, it all starts at the website, 8daysofhope.com. We're accepting volunteers right now for Valdosta, Georgia. We're going to be there for about 2.5 weeks. It's free. We provide food and lodging. We have some spots if you have an RV. You do need to be 16. Any skill set is needed. So 8daysofhope.com to volunteer, to donate. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. And again, as we develop plans to go to North Carolina, we'll keep you guys in the loop.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Okay. God bless you. Have a good day.
You too. It's our brother Steve Tiber, who's the president of 8 Days of Hope.
Chris, I know we have some other news regarding this storm, but I'm with you guys. The thing that kind of surprised me about this is how far inland. I mean, this came across, I guess, what they call the Big Bend part of Florida, and just kept going. And for a hurricane to reach all the way to North Carolina with that kind of, you know, wind power and that amount of rain is just extraordinary. And like some folks have been saying, once in a century kind of disaster.
Well, and the power outages.
Yeah.
Now the millions of people without power. Imagine that, being without power for, you know, it'll probably be weeks before the.
Because we all been reading about first responders, whether they be firemen or what have you, trying to rescue people. Some people stranded on their.
Did you see in Tennessee? Somewhere in Tennessee, they had hospital people
at the hospital.
They were on the roof
that quickly. They couldn't get out.
Patients were on the roof.
Yep.
That was where was that? Somewhere in Tennessee, middle or east Tennessee. I'm not sure where, but
it was Unicoi County Hospital in Tennessee.
The flooding was so bad they had 50 patients on top of the building.
And so quick. Flooding happened so quickly. Yeah. There was nowhere to go but up. They could
Unicoi County Hospital is in Irwin, Tennessee, which according to Google is I'm backing out of it here.
It's okay.
It's east of Knoxville, near the state line.
East of Knoxville. Okay.
East of Knoxville, north of Asheville, like right on the line.
I got you. Also, we have 5 radio stations off the air because of the power.
Yes.
That's not that's trivial compared to people's personal losses and everything, but we are off the air in Valdosta. That's where Steve said they're going.
Yes.
8 Days of Valdosta, Waycross, Dublin, those are all in South Georgia, and Princeton, West Virginia, and Hickory, North Carolina, all off the 5 stations off the air because of the power outages. And I saw some trucks headed that way yesterday, you know,
Yeah.
You know what's great about America is one of the things that's great about America, how people pitch in and help our fellow Americans in time of need. Because I know that you're going to see trucks. I'm talking about, what do you call them?
Like just from
Electric company
Yeah.
trucks, whatever you call those things.
Utility trucks.
Utility trucks. They'll be coming from Missouri and Arkansas,
Michigan,
Michigan, all over to go to, and the coordination that takes
right
for these electric companies to send trucks from other parts of the country that weren't affected to North Carolina, to Georgia, to Florida,
and the people just
Tennessee.
in our own communities, not just here where our flagship station is, but the folks who are listening. We've all experienced this during bad storms. We're all hunkered down in our homes, hoping the power comes back on.
Right.
And these folks in the utility, the power company folks, are out there in the middle of the storm, putting lines back up. It really is extraordinary, and they don't get enough credit. I'm sure they don't get paid enough, but these are dedicated people who are serving everyone else while we're staying dry.
I know a guy here in the area that is involved with the internet service at the local utility here that powers much of this part of Mississippi. And you kind of think, well, it's just the internet. People don't need that. But with a lot of people working from home or trying to communicate now, that's just as important as electricity.
Well, and also I saw continually in reading the stories over the weekend and then on Facebook, people saying, hey, if there's anybody in this area who still has internet, here's where my grandmother lives, here's where my sister lives. If it's possible, can you check? We can't get in touch with them because in a lot of these places, cell towers weren't working. So it's, like you said, Tim, people pitching in and trying to help each other. But the internet can be important, even though we sometimes think of it on a daily basis as just being part of our entertainment or what have you. Sometimes it's a lifeline of communication.
Yeah. We have somebody that's part of our news team that works remotely, and he Zooms in every day. Or we have to call him when Zoom's not working. If we didn't have that communication, we'd have no way to work with him.
Asheville, North Carolina, which is getting a lot of attention because they had the North Carolina National Guard had to rescue 41 people. This has been reported by rescue them, 41 people. That's also where Billy Graham's. We've been there many times. 5 or 6, 4, 5, 6 times. I think I've been there. Asheville, North Carolina.
They have retreats in that area.
Yeah, but what happens in these, and I'm no expert on this, but you mentioned the terrain. What happens in these mountainous areas is, as you can expect, if you get a torrential flood, like, 10 inches of rain, all that rain's washing down into the valley.
Yes. Where most towns are located. You don't build a town
on
usually
top
on
of the mountain.
Side of a mountain.
Right.
It's in the valley. And
in the valley, so you get that kind of, it's just going to be, and they were saying, people, they can't get roads into there.
Right.
Can't get many emergency vehicles in because the roads are blocked.
Yep.
So right now we're looking at more than 100 dead. But as Governor Cooper of North Carolina said over the weekend, the death toll is probably going to rise.
Well, there's a lot of people missing.
Mm-hmm. 30 people killed just in the county that Asheville is in. That's going to increase by a lot in the next few days.
You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We encourage you to go to the 8 Days of Hope website to find out what they're doing and what you can do to help. All right, next story, Chris.
There's a potential strike that's going to be starting at midnight tonight. A strike by workers at ports from Texas to Maine will reportedly hammer U.S. farmers and other Americans already dealing with an economic downward spiral. Apparently, unionized dock workers in the International Longshoremen's Association, which represents about 45,000 members at East Coast and Gulf Coast ports, may go on strike tomorrow if they don't reach an agreement by the end of today or midnight. Now, the two sides to the labor dispute have been at an impasse over issues including wages and automation at ports. Here's what you need to know, America. If these people go on strike and they remain on strike for a long period of time, that is supposed to cost our economy $5 billion a day. Billion with a B. Our economy is already hurting. This could only make it worse. And mean you don't get stuff in stores.
Okay, so layman here don't understand how all this works. Just how the chain of effect. Mm-hmm. So you're saying longshoremen? I know what they are. They're the workers that work in the ports, right? That load and unload cargo, right? I mean, that's extremely important to our country. Are you saying these people are unionized?
Yes.
They are.
Okay, they're unionized. I knew that already. People want to know. You don't know that? Yeah, I know that already. But I'm asking for a friend.
Okay.
They're unionized, and they are threatening to go on a national strike
Yes. From Texas all the way up through Maine.
on the East Coast or the West Coast, both. I mean,
No, I think it's just the Gulf Coast all the way up the East Coast.
okay. And do you know what their grievance is?
They want more pay and better benefits.
And there's also concern about automation. And going forward, of course, this is going to be a problem in a lot of occupations, especially those that require human beings to use their bodies to carry, to lift, what have you. The more companies move to automation, well, just like the auto workers and the auto companies went to lines for making the cars and automated a lot of those lines. I'm sure there are concerns by these dock workers that they're going to be pushed out of their own occupation by automation.
Right. Now, asked about this over the weekend, he was standing on the tarmac. There's an aircraft going behind him, but President Biden was asked by a reporter whether or not he's going to seek to intervene here. Clip 3.
Mr. President, would you intervene in the dock workers' strike if they go on strike on Tuesday?
No,
Why not?
because it's collective bargaining. I don't believe in Taft-Hartley.
Now, just to go over what he said there, the reporter asked him, "Are you going to seek to intervene on this port worker strike situation?" He said no. When she asked him why, he said basically it has to do with Taft-Hartley, and I don't agree with that. The Taft-Hartley Act is
You don't agree with it, or he doesn't agree with it?
Biden doesn't agree with it.
He said it's collective bargaining.
Correct. The Taft-Hartley Act is something from like decades ago that
I'm
basically
very familiar with it.
Yeah, it paved the way for right-to-work laws.
I mean, I can break it down, but I mean, but I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah. The Taft-Hartley Act, the reason Biden doesn't like that is because Biden is 110% union. He doesn't like anything that's anti-union, and right to work means you don't have to pay dues or fees as a condition of employment. Therefore, he's opposed to it, and he doesn't want to get involved here. But as you guys remember, I think I was alive, but I was a baby. You had the air traffic control situation with Reagan back in the 80s.
Yes.
Where there was a labor dispute, and Reagan he didn't have a problem getting involved there. So,
well, no, he fired them all.
But those were federal workers.
They were federal workers. In this case, there is precedent for presidents getting involved in trying to facilitate and help negotiations between union workers, especially a big union like this one, and their employers, the companies that employ these folks. So while I agree with him, that is Biden right there, at least initially it's best for the government to stay out of it and let these folks negotiate their own agreement, going forward. Contract, I guess their contract's about to run out. I'm not sure what the problem is exactly, but let them sort it out. Now, there are times, as I say, when you have strikes that affect the country so severely that an administration, a president, not necessarily him personally, but sometimes I think that's happened, would get involved because it's in the best interest of the national. It's in the best national interest for them to get.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about just in terms of what Chris was saying, stores in Texas and east of the Mississippi, which all depend heavily on products coming into the U.S. through ports, and the dock workers, because they're unionized, the only ones who can handle these products. You could have a situation where very quickly store shelves would be emptied, and then where do people go for food? So in a case like that, the government may have to listen. If this goes on for a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to have people screaming bloody.
But I don't think the government can impose it.
I don't know.
I don't think I don't think the federal government can compel non-government employees to agree to something. I think what they can do is I think this happened with the United Auto Workers or something during Obama's. It seemed like that. Maybe it was Bush, but they got involved. They said, hey, I'm talking about the administration. They got involved directly to sort of facilitate, to help both as a mediator sort of a situation. But
I don't know. I mean, do you bring in National Guard troops to? But some of these come in on these big containers. You don't just get you don't just get 8 guys and just everyone lift on 3. I mean, there are cranes that lift these big containers from ship to shore and load them on trucks so they can take off and deliver their products. So this is not just something you can solve with manpower.
But you're right, though. If you have that completely shut down for a week or two, I mean
stores will run out of their inventory.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
There was a guy interviewed on Fox. I don't have this audio, but he was an expert interviewed by Fox and Friends earlier today about this situation, and he seemed to think that produce would be something you would see affected quickly, whereas you might be able to find plenty canned goods and dry goods.
Are you talking about food being imported?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of that food will spoil if it's not. I mean,
yeah, if it's sitting on boats, ships.
Yeah, and if it's not, like you say, canned. But I don't. Here, we're about to enter into something I know nothing about. That's
we're 36 days.
I do stopped us before.
You're right, but we do get a lot of food imported. People don't think about that. We get a lot of food from
avocados
around the world, but certainly Mexico and Central America and South America. We get
fruit.
We get you get a lot of
French fries from France.
Think about that alone. You talking about McDonald's not having French fries?
Yeah.
That could swing the vote.
Yes.
We are 36 days away from the election.
That could swing the vote for Trump or Harris. I think, whichever one of them takes the wrong side of
Well, and I tell you this, we're kind of joking around now, but if this goes south fast, this could affect Harris, because it's going to be Biden-Harris, quote unquote, doing nothing. Even though, to your point, I'm not sure what they can do. But when people don't have food, they want to blame somebody.
Yeah. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. You're listening to Today's Issues on AFR.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
The city slicker had just driven up to the country store. He noticed a group of men sitting on one side of the store's porch, engaged in a game of checkers. On the other side of the porch was a fellow sitting in a rocking chair. The city slicker, who was at the store to make a big sale and turn a nice profit, decided he would go over and speak to the man in the chair. The man, who was enjoying a good chew of tobacco, had an old hound dog lying on the floor beside him. The city slicker, knowing something of the love that country people have for their dogs, decided that the way to impress the man in the chair was to be nice to the man's dog. So he walked over to where the man was sitting. "Howdy, mister," the city slicker said. "Does your dog bite?" he asked. "Nope," replied the man, giving a good strong spit of his chewing tobacco. The city slicker reached down to pat the dog on the head. The dog responded by biting the man's hand off. Finally, when the other men managed to get the dog off the city slicker, he spoke to the man in the chair again. "I thought you said that your dog didn't bite," the city slicker said. The country fellow, still sitting in his chair, gave another healthy tobacco spit and then spoke. "My dog don't bite. That ain't my dog." One of the tragedies of our age is our unwillingness to be helpful when we can. We see people who are headed for trouble, people whom we could be helpful to, and we simply make no effort to assist them. The Italian poet Dante once had this to say about such people: "He who sees a need and waits to be asked for help is as unkind as if he had refused it." Our generation is seemingly being influenced heavily by this policy of non-involvement. We see places where we could help, where our help is needed, and we turn away with the thought that that's none of my business. And that thought, that attitude is totally false. If you can be of help to your fellow man, and he needs your help, then it's some of your business. We're all part of the family of man, and that makes us all brothers and sisters. Our reason for being in the world is to make a difference, to make it better that we're here. And the finest way we can do that is to lend assistance where and when we can, to have an opportunity to do good. And to fail to take advantage of that opportunity is a reflection of a tragic flaw in our moral character. Non-involvement is a self-defeating attitude because the time will come for each of us when we ourselves will need the assistance of another. The Apostle Paul once wrote, "Be kind to each other." You know, that's still good sound advice today. And the carpenter himself said, "Treat others as you would want them to treat you." From experience, let me say that advice takes precedent over a policy of non-involvement any day of the week. In other words, if it isn't your dog, tell the man so.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me, know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139, verses 23 to 24.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Welcome back, everybody, to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim Wildman here with Ed Battagliano and Chris Woodward. Thanks for listening. Well, we're just a week or so away from the anniversary of October 7th in terms of Israel and what happened there with the slaughter of 1,100, I think it was, Israeli, some of them Americans, Israelis, and that'll be a day none of us ever forget, certainly Israelis. And we have a gentleman on the phone with us from Israel who was a helicopter paramedic on that day. Shafir Botner. Shafir joins us. Good morning, Shafir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you for being on with us here on American Family Radio. I'm Tim with Ed and Chris. You and I don't know each other. You were recommended to us by a mutual friend, and to have you on to talk about what happened and what is happening in Israel. Would you please, first of all, you're talking to primarily an American listening audience here on our radio network. What would you say that Americans need to understand about what's happening in Israel right now, generally speaking?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today with you. And for our American listener, if generally speaking about the situation right now in Israel, although it started a year ago at the south of Israel with the Gaza Strip, right now most of the focus, of course, still Gaza, but mainly right now the north of Israel. We have a quite intense atmosphere over there because of the attacks and missiles and sirens every day, attacks from Hezbollah side. And along with the Hezbollah attacks, we still have attacks from other countries like Yemen and Iraq. They're still sending missiles to Israel. So basically, every citizen of Israel, in every place, is still have the chance to hear a siren in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night and find very fast a safe place to be in. So although the situation is completely, thanks God, differently in Gaza now, the citizens of Israel are still in a very tense days, and I guess you're all hearing talking about further action that the IDF is going to take in order to take that threat away from the northern border. So I would say the new year of the Jewish calendar is coming in 2 days, but it's not going to be a happy one.
Hey,
and people are not going to celebrate.
Shafir, can you tell us a little bit about you are a helicopter paramedic on October 7th? Just give us your firsthand experiences of what you saw and experienced on that terrible, tragic day.
Yeah, it was Saturday morning, and it was my Saturday off. I was at home. I live in the south of Israel, a small suburban next to the capital of the south of Israel, Beersheba. And I woke up like most of the people of Israel from sirens. And I know it sounds strange to people who don't live in Israel, but from time to time that's happening. I mean, out of nowhere, siren, and you're waking up or during the middle of the day. But it was a different atmosphere. Now I know that I could tell that because of the intense and the numbers of the sirens that were simultaneously all over the country. And I realized something is happening. So as I'm doing always, I just put on my uniforms and went on my car. I called my colleague, the manager of the Negev, the South District. And I didn't even need to ask him. He just yelled at me, Beersheba or Fakim, which is a small but became famous town in the south of Israel. Just arrive, be there as fast as you can. And I hit the road, and I got to a junction when I need to choose turn right to Fakim or left to Beersheba. And I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why I choose left and to Beersheba, and it turned out that I saved my life for the first time on Saturday, because if I was taking the second turn, making a right, just a few miles away, terrorists were already located over there, waiting and targeting me with my car, which is like an ambulance with the sirens and with the lights. So I went to Beersheba. I was in our Magen David Adom MDA, which is my EMS organization. That's the national organization in Israel, EMS organization, ambulance organization in Israel. I went to the station over there for a short time, and I got a call from my boss. He was telling me, please go as fast as you can to our south helipad, where the Magen David Adom helicopter service is located there. We have two helicopters of Magen David Adom, one in the south of Israel, and the second one is the north. I guess you know it's a small country, so we don't need more than south and north. I got there very fast, and I got a call from the dispatch center telling me in less than 5 minutes, 3 severely injured soldiers are getting to you. And indeed, it was less than 5 minutes, and I got 3 severely injured soldiers. And to be honest, at that moment, at that time, I didn't realize the size of the event that we're facing with. I'm doing this job for many, many years, and from time to time, I treated soldiers or other people that got injured, even severely. That's my job. That's my nature of my job, and I had no clue what is about to come at that moment. So we took those 3 soldiers, me and my partner, and that was an additional helicopter that joined this mission at that morning. So it was not a medical helicopter. It was a VIP helicopter with seats that they took all the seats out. And since then, I'm calling it Vietnam style. We just put the soldiers on the floor, the empty helicopter with my backpack with the medical equipment. And from that moment, me and my partner were on the helicopter for almost 72 years until 2 hours, 72 hours until Monday evening, making rounds and of taking wounded soldiers, policemen, citizens from the south of Israel, from next to the Gaza Strip, from the Nova Party. I guess you heard about that party. And on the first time that we went on air, the dispatch of Magen David Adom told us, you can't go to the nearest hospital in Beersheba, Soroka Hospital, because it's already closed. Too many injured people are over there. Take those soldiers to the center of Israel. So we flew from the south to the center of Israel, and from the air, it was morning, clear day. I'm just seeing a lot of places with smoke, everywhere smoke, and from far away we could see the Gaza Strip and missiles are, we saw the bright lights from Gaza to over to Israel. On the first few hours, we didn't know what is going on. We realized that we are facing something really big and bad, but we didn't know. Until, we were landing in hospitals, helipads, and people were telling us Hamas is invading Israel, and many terrorists invaded Israel, actually inside cities, as you all saw, I guess, movies and short videos on TV. During those 3 days, we treated, dozens of people, as I said, soldiers, citizens, policemen. Usually during our walk, we're in a position that we are giving strength and power and energy to people that need our help, sometimes families, relatives. And I must say, probably it sounds like a cliche, but at those days, we got power and energy from the soldiers and the policemen that we were treating. They gave us hope and power and hope that everything will be okay, because we thought, me personally, on Saturday morning until afternoon, I thought that we are going to lose our country. Honestly, I thought that this is the situation.
Yeah.
And that was very strange and different at least for me.
We're talking to Shafir Botner, and he is joining us from Israel. He was a helicopter paramedic on October 7th, which is coming up on the anniversary of that. The Hamas attack on Israeli citizens, which was 1,100, I think was the count of people that died that day, were basically murdered, butchered. It was awful, just horrific. And he had to see a lot of the aftermath of that and work during that, immediate aftermath. Chris, did you have a question for Shafir before we let him go?
I did. It's my understanding there are still dozens of hostages being held in Gaza, for example, by terrorists there in Hamas. You mentioned hope a minute ago. Is there still hope that these hostages, which do include Americans, that they're still alive?
I would say definitely yes, because we don't have another choice. We must have hope and think about them all the time. That part of the, I wouldn't call it tradition, but part of being Jewish, the point or the part of saving life, that's what I'm doing every day, but part of the Jewish nation. We don't have other choice. We must believe, think, and do everything that we can to save those people, American, Israel, and other nations, by the way, that are still being kept as hostages over there. And the answer is absolutely yes. And while speaking about the numbers just a few minutes ago, I have to mention that my organization, Magen David Adom, the national EMS, which is different from other, we can speak about that for in another conversation, but in another time. But we lost our men as well. I mean, we were a target at that day. We were a target for the Hamas terrorists, for the Hamas attack. They attacked ambulances and paramedics, medics, and I lost some of my workers and some of my close friends, and even one person that I was grown to his legacy.
Yeah,
he is older, used to be older than my father, so I had to mention that. And
sure.
Before you let me go, if I may, although we are a national organization, the nature of our organization, which is saving lives, and we are part of the World Red Cross movement. We are not a governmental organization, and we are not founded by the state and the Israeli state.
Yeah.
So we are funded by donations and the service that we're giving to the people. So if anyone from the listener wants to donate to Magen David Adom and to help, and I heard just the item before me speaking about our purpose in this world to make it better, you can donate, and you can go to our website, savinglivesinisrael.org, and you can support Magen David Adom. And I must say that everything we're doing, even those days, is thanks to good people that are supporting us all over the globe, and especially from the U.S. So personally, I have to say thank you to all our listeners and all the American people.
Shafir Botner has been our guest. He is and was a helicopter paramedic on October 7th during the massacre committed by Hamas terrorists on Israeli civilians who were helpless. This is cold-blooded act of murder. Over 1,100 Israelis died. And Shafir, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. The website is savinglivesinisrael.org, folks, if you want to give to that organization to help them continue their work. Shafir, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for mentioning that kind of very important subject. Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you, sir. And by the way, those of you who are listening, Shafir did mention that there are other nationalities represented in the remaining hostages. I think 64, at the beginning of September, 64 were still being held hostage and believed to be alive. And so there are 57 of those are Israelis, 6 are Thai nationals, and 1 is a Nepalese national. And there may be, I'm not sure what my count is there, maybe it's still an American or 2. But anyway, these are individuals that are still being held hostage. So we want to thank Shafir Botner for being on with us. Chris, it's chilling to hear someone who has lived through that. And he did very well with his English. I must say, I'm always amazed at people in the Middle East and Europe who know multiple languages and can communicate. But it's chilling to hear stories. He took a left instead of a right. If he had taken a right, he'd be dead.
Yeah, I mean, Americans, millions of Americans lived through 9/11. We saw it happen. We remember watching it on television, hearing all the things on the news or whatnot. But there's a difference between, like, we saw it on television and we lived through something like this. And October 7th was kind of, sort of, Israel's 9/11. And the man we just spoke to and heard from is somebody that actually heard that lived through it. I mean, I've heard stories from people that were supposed to be on that plane or one of the planes
Right.
on 9/11, and they didn't make their plane or flight and whatnot. And
They were supposed to be in one of the buildings, but
right,
had
exactly.
a doctor's appointment, those kind of things.
Exactly, and it hearing that man's story brings those kinds of things back into mind, and I can't say this enough. We've talked about it before on the show. When you read and hear and see things like we have discussed today, whether it's the hurricane, whether it's the port strike, whether it's the situation in Israel, which is still unfolding by the hour, we need to be praying about these situations and to be praying for people like that. I mean, that's not something you ever get over.
Right.
You just learn how to deal with.
Yeah.
You're listening to Today's Issues, excuse me, on American Family Radio. Next story, Chris.
All right. There is a debate tomorrow between the vice presidential candidates. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democrat, and Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate will square off with Ohio Senator and Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance. This one's going to be on CBS. It starts at 8 o'clock Central. It will go a couple of hours. It's going to be moderated by at least two individuals.
2 hours? Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's going to be moderated by two individuals with CBS News, Margaret Brennan, who's one of their anchors, and she reports more often than she anchors. But then Nora O'Donnell from the CBS Evening News will be the other moderator.
And we are we have an event. I don't know if I guess we can tell folks we're screening. Yeah. It's the premiere for Culture Warrior, which is the film that honors the life and ministry of Don Wildman and the ongoing ministry of American Family Association. So we had this set up a long time ago before we knew about the. So we're gonna miss it. Tim and I will miss it, but you won't, right?
No. Oh, the newsroom will be covering the debate. Several of us are going to be watching, cutting audio. Robert Thornton, my brother from another mother in Christ, is going to be anchoring during the debate, and then I'll be helping providing him some cuts. I'll provide 11 billion things for you guys to run.
What did you say?
He's my coworker.
Oh. Why didn't you just say that?
It was far more interesting the way he said it.
I tried to jazz it up a little bit.
My brother from another mother.
Yes.
Okay.
In Christ.
Yes. We're all siblings. We're all children of God through faith in Jesus Christ. Therefore, Ed, you are my actual brother.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to be, what you're saying, you're going to be responsible for the news team for covering the.
Yes. Fred
so Wednesday we'll have coverage.
Where's the debate going to be? Not that it matters.
I should know right off the top of my head. It is in the United States of America.
Ah, good. Narrowing it down.
Where is debate? I should know. Where is debate?
Well, that's
sorry.
It's going to be a start for you right there, Chris.
Yes.
For your news coverage tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the United States of America. New York City.
Huh?
New York City.
Yeah.
New York City. Okay.
That was a 90s reference.
What do you this debate? First of all, does anybody care about a vice presidential debate, Ed?
I would have if I was not going to be attending this premiere, I would be watching it. Not necessarily happily, but I would just because it's part of what we do here in covering it. And I will watch clips of it afterwards and probably early the next morning. But I'm not sure this is going to move the needle any. Both of these are I don't mean this even in a disparaging manner. Both of them, both vice presidential candidates, are professional politicians, and they're both well-spoken. Tim Walz has been in politics for a long time, and J.D. Vance has not been in politics for a long time, but he is a U.S. senator. He has given lots of speeches. He's a pretty sharp guy. I think this is actually going to be a good debate, and I think it'll be substantive in terms of the issues covered. We are going to wait to see how the CBS moderators handle themselves. ABC got roundly criticized, at least by conservatives and those on the right, for their fact-checking in real time of President Trump, but doing none of the same with Kamala Harris. CNN's moderators, I think, were widely praised. I thought they did a great job.
Oh, yeah.
In the debate between President Biden and former President Trump. That was in June. So we wait to see how the CBS moderators handle this and whether they are as biased as The ABC moderators clearly were in the first and I guess only Trump-Harris debate.
Yes, I did. I mentioned this last week on the show, but I'll say it again, and I'll share the link. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is playing the role of Vance in the debate prep, and then Tom Emmer in the House is playing the role of Governor Walz in the debate prep for Vance.
Tim, what do you think? You think this is important politically, this debate tomorrow night?
Well, I would, you're asking my opinion.
I'm asking your opinion.
Opinion's what it's worth. I think probably you're going to have maybe half to 25% of what would watch of the audience that would watch a presidential debate.
Yeah.
So, but I think it will be interesting because a lot of probably sound clips will be carried.
Right.
People will watch. They won't watch the debate necessarily, but they'll watch the clips and the whatever goes viral, if anything does.
Yeah.
From that, but I do think it will be a contrast in somebody who's pro capitalism versus somebody who's pro socialism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, he's an unashamed
right
big government, tax them, regulate them, and grab the wealth and spread it around.
Yeah, he said that what some people call socialism, I just call being a good neighbor.
Yeah.
So
he's a big government guy, and whereas J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, he grew up, as he said, very poor.
Yeah.
And then he was successful in his education and successful in his business, and his book and all those things. So he's very much pro. I would call it capitalism, pro.
Right. Free market.
Free market. So it'll be a big contrast from that perspective.
Yes, I do want to point out, too, and this has been the case for the last couple of debates. So CBS is hosting it, televising it, but a bunch of other networks are going to basically piggyback and air the same broadcast signal. So you can watch the CBS vice presidential debate on Fox News Channel, for example. It'll be on YouTube and other platforms.
What do you think, Ed? I'm going to get your opinion on this thing.
No, I tend to agree with you that the way this influences the election, I think only happens if there's, for example, if Tim Walz comes out with some sort of absurd statement about confiscating guns, or some strong pitch for socialism and price controls. That's the kind of thing that will get played over and over again and will feed into the distrust that a fairly sizable portion of the U.S. has for Kamala Harris. So it could affect her chances if he bungles it. Now, so I think that's the way this becomes.
By the way, when we get back from the break, there is a tiny, slight trend toward Trump in the swing states.
Yes.
And that's happened in the last few days. So we will talk about that when we get back from this break. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Stay with us.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The climax of the book of Exodus, the Creator God came to dwell with his people. You can't approach the holiness of God however you want. Jesus understood this when he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Friends of Israel, bringing biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah. Saturdays, 2 p.m. Central on AFR.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Recovery efforts are underway after Hurricane Helene tore through communities on the Florida Gulf Coast. The region getting hit with a destructive storm surge exceeding 15 feet in some areas, and cities such as Tampa and Clearwater Beach seeing their highest storm surge level in decades. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis providing an update this morning.
The state's collaborating with county emergency management partners to open recovery shelters throughout the impacted area so you can be connected to resources and assistant teams to assist with finding solutions to any barriers that may exist.
Hurricane Helene took at least 25 lives in the state of Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp speaking in Augusta.
It is unprecedented for a Cat 2 hurricane to actually make landfall in Georgia, and to see the level of destruction that a hurricane could do in this community.
Over 100 people have died across 6 states, and officials fear that number will rise. Former President Trump is visiting Georgia today as the state begins recovery. Alexandria Hoff has more from Valdosta, Georgia.
Former President Trump, he plans to get a briefing on the devastation. He's going to deliver remarks, and his campaign says he's also going to help distribute some supplies. And the need for help here, I mean, it is abundantly clear. You just have to look around, drive around a little bit. It is stunning. In Erie, Pennsylvania last night, former President Trump began his rally by sending love and prayers to the families of those who lost their lives. According to the White House, both Vice President Harris and President Biden do plan to come down to affected areas to tour and to visit. They say they want to do so at a time when it won't disrupt response efforts.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posting a video on social media addressing the people of Iran about the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister once again reiterating Israel will do whatever it takes to defend themselves from attacks from Hamas and insists the Iranian government is responsible for the fighting throughout the region. Netanyahu also telling the people of Iran their government is dragging them closer to the abyss.
The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace.
Christians will gather in Washington, D.C. this week. Chris Woodward tells us why.
The Pray Vote Stand Summit takes place October 3rd through the 6th at the Omni Shoreham Hotel. The summit is put on by Family Research Council with sponsors including FRC Action, AFA Action, and First Liberty. Brent Kylan of FRC Action.
You know, we have an exciting lineup, I think, of some great confirmed speakers. They include Ben Carson, Mike Huckabee, Michelle Bachmann, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Sissy Graham Lynch, some government leaders, some other pastors, some issue experts, and a number of others. I think attendees are going to be encouraged.
Many Christians pray. Many Christians stand for truth. However, many Christians do not vote, and Kylan says that we should.
One verse that always comes to mind for me on this is the verse that says, "As we have opportunity, let us do good." And in this nation, one of the opportunities we have to do good is to vote for candidates who are in fact going to advance good. That's not an opportunity all Christians have around the world. It's not an opportunity all Christians have had throughout history, but it is one we have. I think it's our responsibility to steward that well.
In addition to individual speeches, the Pray Vote Stand Summit will also have panel discussions on a variety of topics, such as protecting family and the unborn, education, the 2024 elections, and Israel.
If you'd like more information, you can go to prayvotestand.org.
I'm Chris Woodward.
More than 90,000 residents in a county east of Atlanta have been told to keep sheltering in place a day after a chemical plant fire. Today, a haze and chemical smell spread over Atlanta, prompting city officials there to investigate. Authorities say chlorine was detected in the air from the fire at the BioLab plant in Conyers, Georgia. For American Family News, I'm Rusty P.
Hi, it's Sandy Rios, your old friend from the morning show. So many crucial and frightening events are unfolding before our eyes. I'd like to invite you to come over to the podcast, Sandy Rios 24/7, so that we can work our way through these difficult times together. AFR.net, any podcast platform, or at sandyrios.com. And one more thing, my book, God's Velvet Hammer, is now available on Audible. So come join us at Sandy Rios 24/7, and remember, God's Velvet Hammer, available at Audible.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Tim, Ed, and now Steve Paisley-Jordahl joins us. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, everybody.
By the way, Ed, you want to tell folks how they can, if they miss our show, today's issues, and they want to download the podcast, that is, listen anytime, anywhere to this show, how can they do that?
Yeah, you just go to afr.net, afr.net. That's the home base, so to speak, for our radio network. And at the top, there are a list of drop-down menus. Just go to podcast, get that drop-down menu, and then you can scroll, and there are all sorts of great programs. It's not just this one. But if you do want to catch a Today's Issues episode that you missed, you can go to the little colorful tag, and you click through, and then you can access Today's Issues and download it and listen to past programs that you might have missed. So afr.net and go to podcasts.
You just dodged a bullet, my friend.
I did?
Proverbially. Yeah, if you hadn't have known that answer, that would not have gone well for you.
Well, I've been here so long. If I didn't know that answer, I've been hit on the head or something.
What do you got, Steve?
I've got a friend on the line. I've got my buddy Alex McFarland on the line, who's not too far from Asheville, North Carolina, the site of tremendous devastation from this storm. Hey, Alex, good morning.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
So, Alex, you're a couple hours away from the worst of the flooding, or what?
Yeah, Asheville and Western North Carolina is really special to us. You know, it's a beautiful part of the country. And, of course, you know, the Cove is there, the Billy Graham Conference Center that we go to multiple times a year generally. And I've preached all over that end of the world, and there are towns like Spruce Pine and Grandfather Mountain and Bat Cave, some fascinating names, Chimney Rock and Swannanoa. And yeah, as I'm sure everybody knows, they pretty much from Wednesday to Friday of last week, places got more rain in 3 days than they might get in 6 months to a year, you know. And so there is a lot of flooding in Asheville.
You talked to a friend who lives over there, right?
I did. In fact, well, we talked to a couple, one of whom was Will Graham. Will Graham is the executive director of the Cove, the Billy Graham Center, and I know we've had events there with AFA. And then Will Graham is also the executive vice president of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and we stay in pretty close touch. And the Cove, because the Cove has lots and lots of generators and the ability to produce fresh water, the Cove for the next 30 days and maybe longer is going to be a disaster relief center spearheaded by Franklin Graham and Samaritan's Purse. And a lot of people were texting me. In fact, I bet, I praise God, probably since last night, Angie and I have gotten 100 texts from AFR listeners who say, hey, you're in North Carolina. Are you doing okay? And you know, we are, Greensboro, where we live, is about 2 hours east of Asheville. And there was some localized flooding and some trees down. In fact, we saw some pretty big trees that fell on some houses because of all the big wind. And, of course, the ground is just saturated, so the roots were weak. But what we got in Greensboro is nothing compared to Asheville in western North Carolina.
Well, and part of we talked about this in the first hour, Alex, part of the problem for a lot of people, especially in the Asheville area, but also probably surrounding areas, is that you have communities that maybe have one bridge coming in, and that's been swept away. And, you know, whatever other roads they may have, sometimes they're rural roads, they're gone too. And you have communities that are isolated and not only shut off from the outside world, but they are isolated from the help that could come to their aid as well, right?
Exactly. You know, I had the privilege of being on the Jenna Ellis show this morning, and one of the people we had on the phone is an AFR listener named Tim Bryant, a friend, and he comes to hear us preach and things like that. But he was talking about some of these communities where food is going to have to be airlifted in.
Wow.
At which I know you might think in the 21st century, you know, this wouldn't happen, but it's very mountainous, and there are tall mountains and deep valleys, and even in some blizzards, even as recently as like 2 years ago, they had to airlift food in to people that were deep in the mountains and they were stranded. And now in some of these small communities, like I think there's one called Weaverville and Silva, Murphy, Dillsboro, just small, very historic, beautiful little mountain towns, but the roads are washed out. And another complication is this, and maybe you guys have heard this, but there's a grocery store chain called Ingles, very wonderful grocery store chain, and they've got a gigantic food distribution warehouse that takes food to their stores, plus really through the Mid-Atlantic region. Well, that got flooded. I don't know the full extent, but the Ingles food warehouse has, tens of thousands of pounds of food that is just ruined. And so, and plus, you guys probably know we're on the eve of a port strike.
Yes.
So there's a lot we need to pray about these days.
Amen.
Hey, Alex, I heard that Billy Graham's conference center, The Cove, was shut down. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, praise God, the good news, and I got this directly from Will Graham himself, the Cove is not damaged. They are shut down because they're transforming into a disaster relief center, which is really good. They're on I-40, exit 55. And I had a lot of people text me saying, oh, my goodness, on the Cove's website, the conferences are shut down for the foreseeable future for at least 30 days and maybe longer. And praise God, the Cove is fine. And that's exactly what Will Graham told me this morning. And the Billy Graham radio station, undamaged. It's just that the Cove, until further notice, is going to be a disaster relief center.
Well, I can't remember anything so widespread in my life. We all know hurricanes going to come every year, right? And because of that's just how the earth works. But to have such widespread flooding and now power outages is just I can't remember.
So the iconic hurricane that we all talk about, of course, is Katrina in New Orleans, which decimated
the Mississippi Gulf Coast too.
Yeah. Well, most people think
the flooding
about
in New Orleans. Yeah.
So, Alex, or how would you compare this disaster to that one?
Well, they're all bad, and obviously, when there's loss of life and human suffering, we care. Tragedy is tragedy. For we North Carolinians, up on we're hundreds and hundreds of feet above sea level. Whereas Katrina was down there in New Orleans, and you just don't expect something like this. I know that they say in Asheville, in Buncombe County, Asheville, 30 people have died, and in a nearby community, 19 people died. So it is tragic. Interestingly, this is just bizarre, but 66 years ago, there was another hurricane, Helene, but it was more down on the coast, whereas this is... So each end of our state, the ocean and the mountains, can claim to have been deeply wounded by a Hurricane Helene, oddly enough.
All right, Alex, thanks so much. What are you and Bert going to talk about this afternoon on Exploring the Word?
Well, this week we will wrap up the book of Romans. We're in Romans chapter 11. And by the way, that's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 to 4 Central, live 5 days a week, Exploring the Word. And then on Fridays, we had an amazing show last Friday. We call it Fire Away Friday. So, folks, Exploring the Word on the American Family Radio Network on Fridays. Any Bible question you want to ask, it is live, unscripted. And so we'd hope everybody would listen every day, but especially on Fridays when I say this: if you've ever wanted to raise your hand during a sermon, now's your chance.
Good.
Well, that is on Fire Away Fridays. That's when you will hear Brother Bert Harper repeatedly say, "Alex, you want to take this one?"
It's a joint effort.
Yeah, he tells us though when they get the really hard questions, really hard theological questions, he always pitches them to Alex, which that's why.
I don't know about that.
All right, Alex, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. That's Alex McFarland.
I'm looking at NBC News posted this. Story's 20 minutes old. Now the death toll is over 100. And that's probably going to continue going up.
Yeah, there's
so many
because
people missing.
A lot of people unaccounted for.
Yeah.
I mean, like in the hundreds.
Some of those are going to be people who fled and haven't checked in, or the family doesn't know where they are. But
and some of these places don't have cell phone coverage.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the cell phone.
A number of them are going to be lost, though.
Yeah.
It's just the way.
You know, having been to Asheville, North Carolina, like I said 5 times, so it is down, as we said earlier last hour, it's down in the valley. So you're surrounded by mountains, and it's down in the valley. And I want to say there's a river that runs through it too. I'm trying to think, but it's a very famous place for people to see. The Biltmore is there. Biltmore, home.
There is a river. I'm looking for the name of it. It's the French Broad River that runs
through Asheville.
It's through. It's just looks like it runs right through it.
Okay, so I'm saying if you get 10, 11 inches of rain over a 2-day period, it's going to flood down into that valley and just wreak havoc. And I guess that's exactly what happened. I don't, in the town, it's just as simple as gravity, right?
It's got only one direction to go.
Yeah.
It goes down into that valley. Yeah, the Biltmore is there.
Biltmore's there. The Billy Graham Training Center is there, otherwise known as the Cove, which Alex was talking about.
There's a River Arts District. Asheville's known for its artist community.
Yeah,
and
some freaks.
Yes, it's a very liberal place, and like you said, some freaks.
Yeah. All right, Steve, next story.
Well, kind of following up on the hurricane, the only thing I have to add to this, you might not remember this, but Joe Biden is the president of the United States. We haven't seen a whole lot of him. Kamala seems to have taken the spotlight.
I appreciate your confidence.
I know
that he is still president.
Well, that's what they say. Anyway, he was at a press conference the other day, and one of the reporters, as he was leaving the room, asked him why he wasn't taking more control and being more involved in this particular disaster. And I wanted you to hear what he said, cut 13.
On the hurricane, Mr. President, why weren't you and Vice President Harris here in Washington commanding this weekend?
I was commanding. I was on the phone for at least 2 hours yesterday and the day before as well. I command. It's called a telephone. And all my security people.
Is it not important for the country to see?
And he walks out of the room.
Biden does?
Yes. Now,
who asked that question?
It was one of the reporters, and I don't know which one. It was shouted out. Biden was at the beach yesterday. Yeah, he did have a telephone at the beach. But
yeah, here's the thing. I don't mind presidents taking time off, but he's always at the beach now. And, maybe his feelings got hurt, or maybe that's just what he was told. Relax for the remainder of your term and
lay low.
Lay low, but he is always at the beach now.
But there's no thought of him or Kamala going to Asheville or touring the disaster area. Maybe they will, but
he's still president. And here's what's dangerous about him always being at the beach. Now, I listen. I'm not trying to beat up on the guy. He was unceremoniously tossed out of a moving car, basically, by the Democratic Party. After promising to stick by him and all those things they said, sharp as a tack, he's the right man for the job. Okay. So I understand that. But if you're not going to run for re-election and you are not able to do the job you were elected to do, parentheses, I know some people don't think he won, okay, then you need to step aside, because if we have a foreign policy disaster, if a war breaks out somewhere, you do not want to be at the beach on the phone. You want to be in the White House so you can head directly to the Situation Room and take control. You do not want to have to I don't know how far away he is. Would he a couple hours away? How far
Delaware
away?
by helicopter? Yeah, an hour.
All right. So he needs to be at the White House, or he needs to step aside. But that's not gonna happen. Either one of those isn't apparently going to happen.
I don't think so. I want to talk a little bit about the deep state and our particular.
The deep state at the beach. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, part of it was there. But part of it also remains kind of on the speaker circuit. I want to have you listen to John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. These are two separate, different events, but they're kind of saying the same thing. And we've been talking a little bit about the concern that the Democrats seem to have over what they term misinformation, which a lot of people have defined as information that they don't particularly find convenient.
And the extraordinary steps they seem to be willing to take, which in past generations would have immediately alarmed people because they don't seem to hold the constitutional rights we have as high as most of us do.
That's true. Well, and to that point, I want you to hear a little bit from John Kerry. He was speaking at a World Economic Forum meeting, and this is what he had to say about misinformation, cut 10.
There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways. And
so
that's
you're
really
questioning
dangerous.
really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
So the First Amendment is in the way, and democracy isn't quite up to the task.
Let me tell you that what's frightening. There's a couple things frightening about it. I just want to talk about this one. The origins of the progressive movement at the turn of the last century, 1880 to 1920. This is exactly what people like Woodrow Wilson and others said. They said, in fact, Woodrow Wilson pointed to Europe and said that we need to be more like Europe, who allows the administrative state to make more decisions rather than always doing it through democracy. And what John Kerry just said is what the left increasingly wants to see, and that is the administrative state do what needs to be done and take power away from the American voter because they think the American voter's dumb.
Yeah.
And that is frightening.
And don't cross them because they will kick back. I want you to hear a little bit from Hillary Clinton. This is from about a week ago. She was speaking at the Clinton Global Initiative. And this is what she had to say about misinformation. Cut 11.
She let in, and that's not even...
My fault. Cut 9.
And boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence.
Yeah, they'll send you to prison.
Well, you can be criminally and civilly charged if you slander people or you know what I'm saying?
Shout fire in a crowded theater.
Well, ask Fox News. They went after it. Remember, they got they had to pay. Was it Dominion?
Dominion
voting machines. They had to pay them like how much?
Well, it was close to $1 billion. It was $873 million or something crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, you can be. Well, they voluntarily paid that out.
Right.
Yes, that's true.
Fox did.
They didn't want it to go to trial.
Yes, they didn't want to go to trial. So I'm just saying that's one example. There are examples you can be held liable for spreading for knowingly spreading false information, especially that harms an individual or harms the public. So that can happen. There is precedent for that.
I would say only that harms an individual or the public. You shouldn't be able to be.
No, I agree.
If it's just misinformation about.
Well, listen, misinformation, for a lot of it, is however you interpret your news.
Right.
Okay? So I could sit here right now, as we have on in our studio, and watch MSNBC, and probably about every minute my head's going to start spinning around going, that's misinformation.
Right.
Okay? You take a lefty, they're going to watch Fox News, they're going to go, every about a minute or so, they're going to go, that's misinformation. Right. Huh? So what I'm saying is, we should allow a wide, and I think for the most part, America is known for this and has observed this, a wide divergent of opinions and reporting and so forth, even if it's you would say it's characterized as misinformation. You shouldn't be able to censor it or shut it down.
I think what bugs Hillary Clinton and John Kerry,
it bugs them.
It bugs them that, for example, we have access to X, formerly known as Twitter,
right,
and other conservative-leaning websites who are giving information. Hey, maybe even American Family Radio and American Family News, who are giving information that the mainstream media won't report on, and they call it misinformation.
Right.
I think they want to go after those kinds of outlets.
I agree. They want to shut those voices down in some way or another. I agree with that. I don't think they can right yet. I don't think they have that, as powerful as they are. I don't think they have that kind of power yet. And we do have, as John Kerry said, we do have something called the First Amendment.
Yes.
He said it was in the way, right?
Yep. Yes. That's.
Now, I don't know, to give him, I shouldn't do that because did he mean, I couldn't tell exactly, did he mean it's a legitimate in the way presence, or did he mean it's a deterrent for us to keep getting what we want out of it?
Well,
to your
point, I don't want to claim to know what he was thinking, but the words themselves made it sound like, your second.
It's a roadblock
in
order to getting rid of misinformation.
Well, Tim Walz, the VP the VP candidate, he said when we first learned he was a VP, he's governor of Minnesota, he came out and said, hey, we shouldn't shy away from the First Amendment, shouldn't protect misinformation.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes.
He just said it like that.
That's
You're going like, I'm going like, well, who gets to determine what's misinformation that the First Amendment doesn't protect?
Well, we know how Tim Walz would answer that.
He does.
He does.
Yeah. So, all right, we are out of time. Steve, thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks to Brent Creeley, Alex McFarland,
Chris Woodward, Steve Tiber, Shafir Botner.
Yes, and Brent Creeley, our producer.
I'd also like to thank Brent Creeley, our producer.
Well, you just did.
Yeah. He's an excellent producer.
We doubly thanked him. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.